Thank you everyone for joining us today for this special web event, Orcas and Salmon, in dialogue with Lynda Mapes. You know, second time's the charm. This event is put on in collaboration with nonprofit publisher Braided River and the Seattle Times. My name is Erica Lundahl. I'm the Conservation Impact Manager for Mountaineers Books and our conservation arm, Braided River. I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement that Mountaineers Books is located on Coast Salish territories in Seattle, Washington, and that our offices are based on the traditional Duwamish land. We want to recognize the place-based knowledge held within the tribal community, and we're so grateful for their ancestral and current stewardship of these lands, waters, and wildlife that we cherish so dearly. Braided River is the conservation arm of Mountaineers Books, a 501c3 mission-driven nonprofit publisher of award-winning books about the outdoors, conservation, and sustainability lifestyle for the last 60 years. At Braided River, we inspire people to protect wild places through images and stories that change perspectives. Using the power of beautiful images and supported by a combination of philanthropy and book sales, we publish photography books and create multimedia advocacy campaigns to draw attention to critical ecosystems. We couldn't be more honored to be the publisher of Lynda Mapes' forthcoming book, Orca, Shared Waters, Shared Home. Orca is also co-published by the Seattle Times, the trusted source of Northwest news, information, and entertainment for people who care about thoughtful, independent journalism. They were the publishers of the award-winning Hostile Waters special reports that Lynda, along with a team of reporters, produced over 2018 and 2019 about the southern resident orca whales. For today's event, feel free to use the chat feature, and if you have questions for Lynda, you can use the Q&A option below, and we'll be monitoring it as we go. And on that note, I'm so delighted to have the opportunity to introduce you to our presenters tonight, Braided River Executive Director and Founder Helen Charulo, and Lynda Mapes of the Seattle Times. Helen is the past publisher of Mountaineers Books and founder and executive director of Braided River. She believes in the transformative nature of being in a wild place and in the power of books to change lives. Born in Chicago, she traveled west and earned a degree in journalism with a major in fine arts from the University of Montana. She received the Voice of the Wild Award from the Alaska Wilderness League to recognize individuals whose actions, commitment, and contributions lead to greater awareness about protecting and preserving Alaska's wilderness. And Lynda Mapes is a journalist, author, and close observer of the natural world. Mapes was named Journalist of the Year in 2019 by the Western Washington chapter of the Society for Professional Journalists, and is the 2019 winner of the Best of the West Award for reporting on the growth and development for her orca coverage. Lynda is the author of 5 books, including Enlo, A River Reborn, published by Mountaineers Books in the Seattle Times, and Witness Tree. All right, Helen, Lynda, I'm turning this over to you.
Thanks, Erica. And hello, everyone, and hello to you on Orcas Island, Lynda. How fitting that you are there, Orcas Island. Everyone, tonight we'll talk a bit about Lynda's work and our book coming out in the spring. In the background, we'll include some orca images courtesy of your colleague, Lynda, Steve Ringman, and the Seattle Times. We want to make sure we leave plenty of time as well for questions from the audience. Thanks everybody for coming here and spending time with us tonight. So let's get started, Lynda, with some updates on current events, notably Tahlequah's new little calf. Can you bring us up to date?
I'm overjoyed to bring you up to date. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm impressed by the strength of the pod buoying us up as we got started. We can't hear you. Unmute. There must have been like 50 of those all at once, so I feel very supported. I want to just tell everyone that we do have something very special to talk about tonight, which is the birth of a baby to Tahlequah. Of all the orcas in the southern resident families, Tahlequah is the one who has really captured the world's heart because of her heartbreaking loss of her calf in 2018. the calf that really changed the conversation about orcas. She lost that calf. It lived only about a half an hour, but she did something very unusual, which she refused to let it go for 17 days and 1,000 miles. It was a tour of grief that pulled at people's heartstrings around the world. She was a mother who happened to be an orca. And in that way, she changed the conversation to understand what we really are talking about here, which is families. You know, orcas really are best considered as a society of great antiquity. And the southern orca families have plied these waters of the Salish Sea for thousands of years. And as a species, orcas have been around for 6 million years. You know, they are the top predator in every ocean. They are powerful, genius athletes, spectacular animals in our very midst. And so when Tahlequah lost that calf, I think it really woke us all up to the fact that, you know, we could lose something very special here. These southern residents are unique to the Salish Sea. They were here long before us, and they are a signature of these waters. And so the great joyful event is that she just had another calf, and you know, the baby is doing great. We don't know if it's a male or a female yet. Everyone is hoping it's a female because there's a real dearth of females in the southern resident families. The baby is estimated to have been born on September 4th, and the way that is calculated is just knowing that, you know, her little fin didn't stand up until that day, and it takes a little bit of time for the fin to stand up. So, you know, the people at the Center for Whale Research, who were the first to see her among some of the whale watch boats, calculate that the whale was born on September 4th. And she was last seen on the 9th. So we don't know exactly where Tahlequah and the baby are right now. They're wild, free swimming orcas. They're out there in the Salish Sea. And actually, it's been very hard to see them because there's been so much smoke in the region. But, you know, I think the joy that we all feel with the birth of this whale is just a sense that this baby is an ambassador to the world of the hope we all feel for these families. They, you know, that this is no crybaby species. This is a powerful animal that, given what they need, and that's salmon, they can take care of business. They can do whatever they need to do to survive. But that salmon, they can't do without salmon. And that is our topic tonight. You know, the southern residents and the northern residents are salmon eaters. They don't eat marine mammals. And a lot of people ask me that. Why won't they eat seals like the transients? Or why won't they just eat something else? Well, you know, it doesn't work that way. They co-evolved with the salmon in this region thousands of years ago. And not only that, but they co-evolved and passed on the culture of being salmon eaters, family to family to family, mother to daughter to son, over all those generations. That's what food is to them. Salmon. And at this time of year, Chinook salmon specifically. And Chinook salmon have been declining overall as a species really throughout the range of the southern residents. And this is what we're going to talk about tonight, is orcas and salmon, and why the two are so intertwined, and why really the two are the indicators of the health of our region, which is just another reason why we care so much about these animals, because they tell us a lot about us and our own fortunes and future in the Pacific Northwest.
On one of the stories, what some of your recent coverage was on the Electron Dam, and that was some kind of appalling information, but it also provided some encouraging news as well. Can you give us a little bit of a summary of that?
I'm delighted to. You know, I know we have people on the call tonight from all over the country, so I'm just going to do a little bit of catch up. If you haven't read my stories about this in the Seattle Times over the last couple days, do look them up. Electron Dam was built 116 years ago on the Puyallup River. The Puyallup is a mighty salmon river that comes rumbling off of Mount Rainier, born on the glaciers of Mount Rainier. It's a beautiful, important salmon river. It tumbles all the way into Commencement Bay in Tacoma, south of Seattle. And, you know, this dam has been around a long time, and it recently changed hands from a private utility company to that sold it to just a for-profit corporation that has a lot of smaller hydroelectric plants around the region. And, you know, they acquired this dam a couple of years ago, and their plan was to refurbish it, bring it up to more modern standards, because right now it doesn't meet modern environmental standards. It's a known fish killer, a killer of listed endangered species in the Puyallup River, yes, including Chinook salmon, including spring Chinook salmon, which is a rare fish these days in the Puget Sound and a very, very valuable fish for the southern resident killer whales. Well, so the developer, the owner of the dam, was working at this project to fix up the dam and used something that they were not permitted to use in that process, which was astroturf, you know, artificial turf like you see on athletic fields, to use it as a liner underlayment for part of their process. And of course, not surprisingly, overnight, the river tore out a big hunk of the astroturf and sent it downriver along with an estimated 4 to 6 cubic yards of crumb rubber, which is little tiny bits of hard black rubber. And, you know, this came to light because an employee of the company who had been a lifelong fisherman on the Puyallup just kind of went off. And you know how it is these days, everybody's got a cell phone in their pocket with a camera. So he made a video of this crumb rubber and the spill of it into the river and put it up on social media. And so word got out, and, you know, in no time there were stop work orders and so forth. And at this point, the Pierce County executive, this is the local government there, has announced that the task now is to just keep the stop work order in place on the dam, button it up for safety's sake over the winter before high flows, but start working with the Puyallup tribe to get it taken out. So this is a dam that's been there for 116 years. It's been a known problem for salmon, therefore for whales, for many years. And now suddenly in the space of just a couple weeks, because of this incident coming to light, there's a conversation about removal that's been started. So, you know, things can change very quickly. And I think that this is important for people to remember, that even bad things can turn into new developments. And, you know, we don't know how this is going to come out. The owners of the dam want to fix it and keep it operating as a non-carbon energy source. It fuels electricity for about 20,000 homes. But what the county executive for Pierce County said was the benefits from this dam in no way outweigh at this point the damage that it's doing to fish, and that, you know, the fish and the fish that feed the whales are just too important, and it's time for this dam to go. And, you know, I think that the story here is an important one because it tells us about a lot of things. It tells us about the power of one person, the employee whose conscience bothered him and who wanted to make a statement on behalf of the fish he cared about. And so just put the video out on social media. That took courage. And then the fact that so many people rallied around this story. Gosh, did I ever hear from people right away? There was just a real sense of outrage that this had happened on a salmon river in Puget Sound. And that's a good thing. People should be outraged, for heaven's sakes. I mean, to me, it's a good sign that with everything that people are going through these days, and that's a long list, they can still get good and outraged about someone polluting a river in Puget Sound.
One of the other things that you told me about recently is seeing underwater video of orcas that showed you a side of their personality and behavior that really provided some new insights to you. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Your descriptions of it were really quite evocative.
This was so delicious. I mean, one of the really fun things that you get to do as the environment reporter for the Seattle Times is sometimes ride along with scientists who are doing really, really exciting work. And Andrew Treitz is head of the Marine Mammal Unit up at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. And he, for the last month, was at sea on a beautiful old workboat packed with 8 other researchers cruising around with the northern resident orcas and the southern resident orcas with a very focused purpose. What Andrew wanted to do was try to, by following these whales around and basically trying to be a killer whale himself, understand, where is the food problem? Is it right here in the Salish Sea in the summertime? Is it somewhere else in their vast foraging range? Don't forget, the southern residents go all the way down to California for their food in the wintertime. They're out on the coast. They also, of course, come into central Puget Sound in the wintertime. And so he wanted to investigate the question of where are the salmon and where are the whales? And so Andrew did something that I'm not sure anyone's ever done before, which was put a camera right on some of the northern resident orca whales and some of the southern resident whales using a tag about the size of a paperback book. It weighs about 2 pounds, and sticking it on the dorsal fin. So this video is actually taken by a killer whale. The videographer is a member of D-Pod, and you're swimming along with the D-Pod right now. And D-Pod is out there in the territory of the northern residents, and they're swimming along, and this is what we get to see. And right now, what I think is so beautiful is the mother touching this baby. The mother, as you see, has her fin just extended as they're swimming along, and the baby is perfectly positioning itself to get a belly rub and a little bit of a tummy scratch from its mom. You know, I think one of the things that's been so beautifully revealed is this underwater world of the orcas. To swim along with them, to watch them touch and play, and what Andrew said to me is so exciting to him is to understand, number one, the incredible athleticism of these animals. They're salmon slayers extraordinaire. They just go from, you know, they dive to great depths. They accelerate, they turn, they roll, they go after these fish and have to chase them down one by one, and they rip them to pieces and share the hunks with the rest of the other pod around them, and then they go on and get the next one. But when they're not doing that, they're very affectionate with one another. They're playing. Their social lives were very much revealed underwater. It's hard to see most of the time what's going on with these whales. We only see them in glimpses at the surface. But by putting these special tags on the whales with suction cups, which are programmed to come off in anywhere from hours to a couple of days, we really got a kind of first ever videographer peek done by the whales themselves, Orca Cam. Not only that, but they had a videographer using a drone up in the air. This was a videographer from the Tahlequah Institute who was also on the ship, and got fantastic drone photography of these animals as they're swimming along. And again, that aspect, looking down from above, you can see things that you can't see from the level of a boat. And so what was revealed in some of that footage, indeed also was some of this complex and very beautiful social behavior between the families. And I think as well, one of the things that surprised the researchers was just how much these animals travel, especially the southern residents, that they'd be traveling 250 kilometers over the course of 2 days, and it's just nothing for them. And finally, one of the things that Andrew shared to me was that when they were anchored one night across the city of Vancouver, right there in the bay, they were so dismayed, really, to realize how much the world of the southern residents has changed. That, you know, they're living in such urban waters. Most of these tourist postcards that you see, they're in these beautiful places, and indeed they do live in beautiful places. But the southern residents live in a much tougher place than the northern residents. Their water is noisier. They have less variety of fish from which to choose and fewer fish. And they're dealing with a lot more vessel traffic. And these stresses take a toll on them. And scientists believe these are the three main reasons why they're declining. This is a picture that they're still trying to put together. Is disease part of the problem? Is inbreeding part of the problem? But all the fingers keep pointing back to food. You know, that this is an animal that too often in too many places in its seasonal range isn't getting enough to eat. I want to mention that that story about the research done by the UBC researchers and the Tahlequah Institute is going to be in the Seattle Times on Sunday, along with a lot of the videos. It's special stuff, and I think you'll enjoy it. Take a look.
Well, and you have been working on this for years. You've done more reporting on the interrelationship of orcas and salmon than any other journalist. This has clearly captured your heart. What was it that drew you to this story in the first place? And what is it that keeps you with it?
Oh, that's easy. It's the animals themselves. I mean, they're incredible charisma. They have great imminence. I mean, with my colleagues that I've worked with on this story, photographer Steve Ringman, videographer Ramon Donpour, you know, the times that we're out on boats with scientists who have allowed us to join them in their work, honestly, one of the big tasks is keeping your composure when these animals come alongside. they're just so magnificent and so overwhelming in the sounds they make, you know, that breath. I mean, it is a sound from the beginning of the world. And you watch them roll over on their back and scull underwater just for fun. And you watch them hurl themselves into the air. This is an animal that weighs many, many tons, and they'll just rocket out of the water into the air and land with a terrific splash. And what I love too is the playfulness. You know, you'll suddenly hear all this loud smacking sound, and it's one of the orcas just wailing away on the surface of the water with its pectoral fin, probably just for fun, who knows, or maybe to gather the rest of the pod up to go somewhere. I mean, these are animals with enormous charisma, and I'm very moved by their family dynamics. You know, they're so loyal to one another. They're so bonded to one another. They never separate. The families stay together for life, which is very unusual in the animal kingdom. Of course, I'm very moved by the role of the matriarchs leading the rest of the pod to fish. This is, again, very, very unusual in animal society for the females to have a very long postmenopausal life stage. There are fewer than, I think, half a dozen mammals that do that in the world, including us. And the southern resident matriarchs are the ones who hold that critical knowledge, especially when the salmon are scarce, of where to find them. And you know, there's a poignancy to this, because sometimes they're going places that their mothers taught them to go. But honestly, are they getting fish, or are they getting just a memory of fish? I mean, when the oldest member of the entire southern resident clan takes her family all the way down south of San Francisco to try to get some winter Chinook, which is the most endangered Chinook salmon in North American waters, is she actually getting any fish, or is she just going there because her grandmother took her there? You know, and will we get to a point where this abundance lives only in the minds of the grandmother whales and of the elders of the tribes and of the elders of the people who have been here? I never want to see that happen. And it's interesting, because what the whales need is the same thing that we need, which is this abundance and a healthy ecosystem that continues to produce the food that the whales need, that, as a matter of fact, we love to eat, that feeds the bears, that feeds, you know, the dippers that come for the salmon eggs in the salmon streams. This is a whole web of life that is supported by salmon. Salmon is what makes this place work. Salmon feeds the land. Salmon come back, and the nutrients of phosphorus and nitrogen that they bring to the forests, that they bring to the soils. These streams feed the next generation of salmon from the nutrients brought by the last generation. It's all connected. It's a beautiful circle of life, from the high country to the low, from the freshwater to the salt. The salmon weave it all together, and the orcas weave our entire state together. Because everywhere in Washington is orca country. You can be over in the Palouse area of Washington state, dryland wheat country. Look around, you're 300 miles from saltwater, and yet you're still in orca country, because those salmon streams, the Snake River, the Chinook, they come all the way back to those mountain streams. Even in Idaho, they're twining through wheat country to come out the mouth of the Columbia, where, believe me, in the spring, those orcas are waiting for them. How do we know? Because we actually have tagged some of the orcas, and we see them. The tagline is like a scribble off the mouth of the Columbia in the spring. They're just waiting for those juicy Chinook coming back. So we are connected by the salmon across this region. We're connected by the orca across this region. And that's a beautiful thing. And it's why the birth of this baby, I think, is such a beautiful event, because this animal is an ambassador for all of us. Something to consider ourselves as connected to, you know, be a godparent to this little tiny baby whale, and feel a sense of connection to its future, because our future is connected to that little baby whale. If that little baby whale is doing well, it means something good is happening for our environment.
Well, and in addition to the animals and the salmon, you've met some extraordinary people along the way. Scientists, politicians, native tribes, and they have also helped this story come together for you. There's one person in particular I'm thinking about. Can you tell us a bit about Billy Frank?
Well, the late Billy Frank is a giant to so many people in this region. He was the original tell it like it is person in my life on the whole subject of salmon. And I think a lot of people would say that about the late Billy Frank. He was an Nisqually elder, and as he once explained himself to me, I'm not a policy guy, I'm a getting arrested guy. And what he meant by that was getting arrested dozens of times during the fish wars in our state, which were violent, and not to be called anything but violent, clashes with game wardens and with police who were trying to chase the native tribes of our state off of their fishing grounds, telling them that they had no right to fish there, which was egregiously wrong. And Billy Frank and others stood their ground on that and just refused to take that. And so he and others fought back and eventually took it to court. And this is why we have the Bolt decision in our state that solidified once and for all the treaty right that, you know, the Stevens treaties signed by the Western Washington tribes in 1855 guaranteed forever the right to fish in their usual and accustomed places, which in many instances are far beyond the borders of these very small reservations that ultimately were laid down on the land. And so this right to fish wherever their ancestors had reserved that right abides today and has been a very driving force in conservation for our state. The treaty right lives. These salmon rights, fishing rights are very, very important in a lot of aspects that have to do with everything from water rights to development to land management. The treaties are living documents, and people like Billy Frank, who stood up for the treaties and their meaning and the salmon in their meaning, have benefited not only the tribes, but all of us. Because number one, the treaty secured clear title for development. I mean, you look at a place like downtown Seattle, and you look at all that wealth that was created here in Seattle. Well, it was created partly because of the treaties, and it was created because of the clear title that made that possible. But it was also created, let us be clear, on the backs of the salmon. And this is part of what we are still working on right now in this region, is to go to the places that have not been developed and preserve and protect them. Go to the places like the Elwha River that were developed for hydropower, and take out those two dams, which taking those two dams out has transformed that river into once again being on its way to becoming a premier river in Washington state for salmon and all of the animals that salmon feed. I'm going to have a story coming out about that soon in the Seattle Times about the strength of those Chinook runs and how they're coming back strong. It's going to take a while, but it's working. And then there are other places that we're going to need to keep working on if we are going to be a salmon state far into the future, and a place where the orcas thrive. And Billy Frank was a person who stood up for the salmon, which really meant standing up for all of us and for what makes Washington, Washington, and the Pacific Northwest, the Pacific Northwest. I think one of the saddest things that came out in my reporting of hostile waters with my colleagues was a trip we took to California. We went down to the Central Valley because the orcas do. We thought, okay, we're going to go everywhere they go. Everywhere they look for salmon, we're going to look for salmon, and we're going to find out what it's like for them down there. And basically what we saw was a look into the future in Washington if we don't work at this and work a lot harder. This is a winter Chinook being held up by Bo, a man I met who works for U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and that's Shasta Dam behind him with no fish ladder. So cause and effect are seldom quite so visible. You see this critically endangered run of Chinook salmon, a dam with no fish passage. The Central Valley of California has been extensively replumbed for agriculture and for people. The water diversions are some of the largest you'll see anywhere on Earth. It's a place that the salmon have been severely punished in. I mean, they're just really, it's almost no place for these winter Chinook to live at this point. They've been consigned to the hot valley floor of the Central Valley. They used to spawn high up in the cold mountain streams of Mount Shasta. They can't even go there anymore. This is a critically endangered run. And these are the fish that those southern residents are seeking when they go down there in the winter. They're looking for these fish. And you know, it wasn't that long ago that there was a big salmon fishery for winter Chinook in Monterey Bay, California. I remember reading a Sunset magazine article from 1903 about salmon fishing in Monterey Bay. And you know, when we were in California, we saw so many signs that salmon had just disappeared from the landscape. You didn't see any reference to salmon around you. Nobody talked about salmon. This is a place that really people don't think of as a salmon state anymore. It's a great state for so many things, but salmon, not so much. And you know, that could happen here. And I think that would just be such a terrible change in our identity as Washingtonians, as people of the Pacific Northwest. But it's a bigger story than that. To me, it really is a national story about preservation of place and preservation of two very special animals, monarchs, really, twin monarchs of the Pacific Northwest, orcas and the salmon they depend on. Look, if we can't do this here in the Pacific Northwest, this species preservation that is so necessary, I don't think you can do it anywhere. With so much prosperity, so much good wish for these animals.
Well, let's take a look a little bit more about what you see at risk for this place that we call home, with the possible loss of orcas and salmon and other species that are weakened by basically what's human-imposed pressures. Can you talk to us a little bit about the tension between a region that's applauded for its clean hydropower set against the harm to salmon runs? Orca experts have told you that the southern residents can't recover without removal of the 4 lower Snake River dams. That's very controversial. What solutions are you hearing about that speak to both of these things?
I want to turn that question around and speak to it much more positively. I mean, I have spent my summer writing about so many dam removals. My editors are starting to tease me, saying, it's the summer of dams, knock it off. And the point is, Helen, there are deadbeat dams all over the region that honestly don't do anything for anybody anymore. They were built a long time ago. They broke, nobody needs them, people have moved on. And what is being understood is that dam removal is emerging as a community solution to community problems. You know, let me give you the example of the Nooksack Dam. So this is a dam that, you know, the city of Bellingham built that thing, and they looked at it and realized that trying to bring it up to modern standard was going to be too expensive. And so rather than spend the money on that, they decided to buy water from the Snohomish water provider, perfectly good water. Part of the region was already using that water. And they decided to work with American Rivers as the technical partner to take the dam out. And funding came in from various sources, various foundations. As a matter of fact, the Washington State Legislature put in about $11 million for this dam removal. And I mean, it was just done in a couple of weeks. Boom. And the sense of celebration of having come around to this solution, which really worked for everybody, from the ratepayers to the city to, of course, the fish, is spectacular. And that's just one example. And there are emerging conversations around the Enlo Dam out on the Similkameen River over in eastern Washington, which has been sitting there blocking more than 100 miles of salmon habitat. It hasn't generated a kilowatt since 1954. I mean, literally the windings have been chopped out of the generators for copper. So, you know, what's next for the Enlo Dam? I think you can be pretty sure it's not going to be a kilowatt, but it might be a very important conversation about dam removal and salmon recovery. And I could go on about dams that are sitting out there that really what's needed is a partnership for thoughtful removal strategies that help pay for it, that do the engineering, figure out the to-do, and then it's done. I mean, it's important to recognize that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of dams all across the country, and many of them really don't work for their communities anymore. And you're not losing, you're gaining by taking them out. There are other dams that are still vitally important. They're providing essential services for their communities. What's needed is an intelligent, fact-based conversation, case by case, place by place. And, you know, with the Elwha, It's another perfect example of a community, Port Angeles, that was better off taking these dams out than keeping them. They couldn't be brought up to modern environmental standards. The owner at that time, Crown Zellerbach Corporation, didn't want anything to do with them. So the US government bought them for the purpose of taking them down. And it was paid for $350 million of taxpayer money. It is still the largest dam removal ever anywhere in the world, and Washington has taken down more big dams than any other location anywhere. Now the Klamath is an emerging story. This is going to be the next and biggest dam removal of all. Keep running into roadblocks that are I would really call them stumbling blocks rather than showstoppers. They're, you know, the owner of the dam is Pacific Corps. They want these dams down, as do so many others, because once more, they're too expensive to bring up to modern standards. You know, that'll be the next one. I think the proper way to think about dam removal isn't that this is some inflicted monkey wrench onto communities. It's a problem solver that communities where it makes sense embrace.
The book that we're doing together, you and me, Braided River, in co-publication with the Seattle Times, Orca, Sharing Waters, Sharing Home, is going to be published this spring. It's a book. You've been doing a lot of journalism, a lot of articles. How do you believe that this book can make a difference? Because that's what you and I really want to see happen as a result of this. How do you see it making a difference?
This is a very intimate book. It takes readers into the lives of these whales in every season, everywhere they go. It is lavishly illustrated. My colleague, Steve Ringman at the Seattle Times, worked his heart out all over the region as we reported hostile waters. My colleague, Emily Eng, created spectacular graphics that go inside the head of the whale to explain exactly how they perform this miracle of echolocation by which they see with sound. These are beautiful graphics that really enable that you can just get lost into the world of the miracle of the orca and how it does what it does. She also beautifully explains the very complicated life history of these animals, that they live over a very broad range, and that as a matter of fact, they're part of many other families of orcas that have different diets and different home ranges. It's one species, but many types. So between Emily and Steve, we have a visually rich, nuanced, intimate telling of the lives of these whales. And we did everything. I mean, we went out to sea for a week on the Shimada, NOAA's premier research vessel. These are some of the scientists we work with there to probe even the food chain, even get myself a nice jar of seawater and get a sense of you know, the microscopic building blocks of life in the sea. And, you know, when they first pulled up this brown goo, I thought, wow, I got up in the middle of the night to see that. But then I shone my flashlight beam into it, and what do I see but this glass slipper ballet of life? And I even took it to bed with me and just sat there in my bunk and looked at it because it was so miraculous to me. All this little glistening life in this jar that is the beginning of everything. These copepods and zooplankton, they feed the forage fish that feed the salmon, that feed the whales. You know, the old saying in Coast Salish country is no little fish, no big fish, no blackfish. It's all connected. And we did that in this book, Helen. We did it all. We went from the open ocean to look at the impacts on salmon and the food web out there. We went to the great rivers of our state, including the Columbia. We went to the Salish Sea to see these whales as they are in their summer foraging grounds, dealing with everything that they deal with there. There's been a terrible lack of fish in the Fraser River, which is their most important salmon river in the Salish Sea, and that the depletion of salmon runs there has just been a terrible thing to watch. But I want to stress that the book is also a celebration of life. I mean, let us not forget, the Salish Sea is boiling with life. In fact, because of the Marine Mammal Protection Act in the 1970s, there are more marine mammals thriving in the Salish Sea today than at any time in modern history. More humpbacks, more gray whales, more transient whales, more seals, more sea lions, more dolphins. It is spectacular out there. This picture Steve took this, I love this picture, when we were out with Joe Gatos of the Sea Dock Society, just on a cruise to go look around the Salish Sea and enjoy this catenation of life. And we watched these seals snoozing on a rock. We watched the baby seals nursing at their mother. We listened to the soft calls of the seabirds. We watched orcas in the far distance with their spectacular black fin in the blue water against Mount Baker. And we just thought, you know, this is such a special place. And we live in a place that is alive with this vast intelligence, these beautiful animals. And not only that, but we have these great cities, these great communities. And, you know, we live in a place where you literally can watch the southern residents swing by in the wintertime from a beach in West Seattle and hop on a bus and ride downtown and enjoy a tapas bar. It's a remarkable place. And I know we're going through a pandemic now, and right now, maybe not a bus and maybe not the tapas bar, but it's going to come back. And I think that we just have something here that is so very special and so very alive. And the book, we don't sugarcoat anything. We lay it out there, but I really want people to know that the book is also a celebration of life and all of the connections between the lives of the Salish Sea, from the forage fish and the herring to the zooplankton, all the way to the salmon, all the way to the orcas. And I think that's what I found so exciting in the reporting, was the connection across these ecosystems, across this vast geography, all the way to the intimacy of the connections between these animals and between these animals and us.
Well, Lynda, I want to thank you for sharing your stories and your wisdom, and obviously your deep passion for the orca, salmon, and all things Salish Sea. We want to allow some time for the audience to be able to ask you some questions, but before I turn this back over to Erica to get the questions going, our book with Lynda is going to be a storytelling tool for marine conservation engagement across Puget Sound, to educate, to inspire, and to build grassroots support for tangible actions that will support orca health. As I tell all of our Braided River authors and photographers, the real work is not over when you turn in your manuscript. The real work begins once the book is published. And it's the beginning of a multi-year journey and commitment. And we have a goal of inspiring and activating as many people as possible to protect the natural world. Our authors, photographers, and our partners like the Seattle Times play a huge role in making the most of a book like Orca, to make the case for why this work matters. And our work would not be possible without support from passionate donors like many of you on the call today. With your support, we can make this book a foundation for a multi-year public outreach effort of media events with Lynda and partnerships with education and community groups working together to protect and restore Puget Sound and the greater Salish Sea. And along with our partners, you can help provide the tools and concrete actions that people can take. As with all Braided River projects, the book launch will be the foundation for events, exhibits, classroom appearances, and so much more. As a nonprofit, book sales alone won't cover the expenses of the advocacy and impact campaign. And these things are made possible through the help and support of donors like you. We have a link that we'll put in the chat about how you can support this work. And in appreciation for your support, if we can hear from you by October 1st, we will include your name printed in the book. And you can also make a gift in honor of someone so that they can see their name in the book. And as many people right now especially are looking for ways to brighten the spirits of others and support small businesses this year ahead of the holidays, this could be a great way to do that. So we have lots of levels of giving, and we hope that you'll contribute to help us to spread the word. I'm especially encouraged by how many passionate people we have on the call today. And there's one thing that I've learned over decades of doing this work, and that is that every voice truly makes a difference. So thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Erica and your questions. Thank you, Lynda.
Hi, everyone. Am I off mute this time?
Yes.
Oh, we're getting a lot of great questions. Several people asked about the image of the many people with their hands on the totem. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, this was a beautiful thing to witness. So the Lummi Nation is very deeply invested in bringing home Tokutai. This is a whale that is still at the Miami Seaquarium. She was captured, gosh, 50 years ago this August, and has been living at the Miami Seaquarium ever since. This is the smallest tank anywhere in North America where a orca whale is kept. And the Lummi Nation is determined to free her. As a matter of fact, there are a couple members from the Lummi Nation at the Seaquarium now, today, working on that. I know they're going to be unveiling a lawsuit in a couple of days. And what you see here is the hands of many, many people from the Bellingham community putting their hands on this totem pole that members of the Lummi Nation trailered all the way to the Seaquarium as an inspiration for the quest to free Tokutai. And this is a beautiful carving that was made by Lummi tribal carver Jewel Praying Wolf James with a couple of others helping him. And they actually trailered this thing all the way to Miami and held ceremony for her. And not only that, but they took a loudspeaker with recorded calls of her family and played them loud enough for her to hear them in her enclosure in the Seaquarium. Why did they have to do that? Because the people who own the Seaquarium would not let them inside. And so they demonstrated on the sidewalk. And that's what you're looking at here is this totem pole at the beginning of the journey, all the way across the country. And they stopped at reservations all along the way to meet with other tribal members and other communities all along the way to spread the word about Tokutai. So, it's been there 50 years. She's an older whale at this point, and there's a big controversy about, well, maybe she'd die en route, and NOAA would have to weigh in on letting her go. The owners of the aquarium have no desire to let her go. They've said over and over again that she's better off there than in the Salish Sea, where her family members are struggling to survive. That always profoundly, I would say, offends the members of the Lummi Nation who are working for her release. Let us not forget they regard the southern resident orcas as their relatives, literally family members, and there is a long and very beautiful account of why that is in the book. The story of the blackfish and the story of the orca and how it is that it came to be that the members of the Salish Sea tribes and the orcas are actually family. It's a beautiful story. It was told to me by the late Bill James, an elder at the Lummi Nation and their traditional chief. I'll never forget sitting by the wood stove with him and listening to him tell me that story in his beautiful soft voice while the rain fell and the wood stove ticked with heat. All around him were the shavings of cedar from making cedar hats and carving. And he was a master weaver, and his work was all around him in the room where we sat. It's a precious, precious memory, and I shared that story, which we recorded, completely uncut, completely unedited, just as he told it. To me, it's one of the really beautiful gifts of the book. It is so imbued with the culture of the Coast Salish tribes and their understanding, which is unique, of these whales.
Thank you. We have a question that was actually that came in over email from Kevin Campy, and he said, ahoy, Lynda, and thank you for endlessly informing the discussion about orca conservation. Do you feel that Washingtonians and British Columbians have a good sense of the sacrifices required to actually save the resident orcas and the benefits we would get from those sacrifices?
I really do. I mean, this is the thing. Whenever I talk to people, wherever I go, I always get a sense that people are rooting for these animals. They want to live with them in their midst, even if they don't see them. They just want to know they're there. They know they're supposed to be there. They know they've been there for thousands of years. And they do understand that this is a place that, if we're going to have these animals, we're going to have to share these waters and share this home. That's why I gave the book the title it did, because that really is what it's about. They were here first. We're here now. if we're going to live here together, we're going to have to share this place. And I'm frankly very inspired by some of the things that I see going on around me. For instance, the Washington State Legislature this past session got started on legislation to change the long-standing standard for development, which in our state has always been no net loss, meaning you can't make it worse. It has to be the same by the time you've finished your development. There's a movement in our state to change that to it has to be a net gain, that it's not enough just to not make it worse. You need to make it better. And I think they're building on the success of things like the dam removal in the Elwha. People can see in both very large scale restorations, but also in the smaller scale restorations, which are going on by fish enhancement groups and communities all over the region, it works. Nature is something you can count on, that if you give these animals the space they need and the food they need, they will take care of the rest. And then we get to live with the results. And what feels better than that? What were you always taught? Leave it better than you found it, right? Whether it was your campsite or wherever you were. And that is the teaching for all of us who live here, that, you know, we have a moral obligation to leave it better for the next generation. And I know the world feels very big and very overwhelming right now. So what better way to respond to that than in your watershed, in your home place, wherever home is, to make it better and work with your neighbors to do that? What could be more rewarding? I think that this absolutely is grasped by the people of BC and in Washington and the Pacific Northwest. I think it's deeply and well understood, and that it is one of the things that ties us together. It's not Democratic, it's not Republican, it's not urban, it's not rural. It's about living here and being in love with this place.
We had a question from David George Gordon, who's actually a Mountaineers books author. And he was asking about the choice to eat salmon or not eat salmon. Does it help the orcas to not eat their salmon? And if so, are there types of salmon that should be avoided?
You know, we're lucky. We have so many choices here. This is easy sneezy. If you're concerned about taking a Chinook out of the mouth of a whale, no problem. Sockeye is a wonderful fish to eat. The sockeye runs are wild runs. They are healthy runs. These are putting money in fishermen's pockets, and it's putting good protein in your mouth. I mean, sockeye is a beautiful fish, and I'd say go sockeye. You know, there are lots of people out there who are chum fans. Coho is a fish that's a delicious fish to eat, and the whales do eat coho, but they're more abundant. I would say, you know, if you want to sit down to a dinner and not even have to wonder how this Chinook wound up on your plate rather than in an orca mother's belly, have a sockeye.
We're getting a few different questions in about shipping patterns. And does shipping patterns need to change in order to save the orcas? And what would that take?
I actually have some really good news about this. The Port of Vancouver, the Port of Seattle, these big shipping entities are taking steps with shippers to voluntarily reduce their speed. This makes a big difference. Noise is directly related to speed. The slower you go, the quieter it is. And now for several summers running, when orcas are present, they have been running these trials of voluntary slowdowns, and the participation rate has been terrific. And some of the early research shows a marked decrease in the exposure of noise for the orca whales. So this is a very good thing. This is a new thing. It's an experimental thing. But so far, so good. One of the things I learned from Joe Gatos when we were out together filming shipping going on in the Salish Sea was that part of this is also just about repair, that these different engines, if they're not kept in good repair, are very noisy. And so, you know, there's a lot to be known, learned, and done about bringing these sorts of engines up into repair so they're not as noisy. And I should be saying propeller, not engine. It's not about the engine, it's about the propeller. And so, you know, shipping is an issue, and, you know, the studies that have been done have shown that if you go slower, it makes less noise. It makes a lot of sense.
To follow up on that, there's a question on commercial fisheries and whether there's agreements on how commercial fisheries continue to fish for salmon.
So commercial fisheries have been enormously reduced and reduced and reduced and reduced. I mean, the story of the Northwest is an initial horrendous overfishing of salmon. And we've all seen the pictures, right, of salmon just rotting on scows and on docks of just grotesque excess. And, you know, that definitely hurt the runs, there's no question. And overfishing continued for decades. I would say that from the scientists that I talk to, the amount of fishing reduction that's already been made is very significant. And at this point, really what we're looking at are much harder changes that have to do with how all of us live on the landscape and how much development is being done in the landscape that's damaging salmon streams. And this is much tougher because it's about all of us and the things that people like to do, from building houses to shopping malls and roads and stormwater runoff and logging and cutting of vegetation. It's, you know, if you think about hydrology and how the water runs off the land and into the water, that has everything to do with us. I mean, I would encourage people to turn their back on the water and look at the land and ask themselves, are we living in a way that is keeping our fellow creatures in the water in mind? And too often the answer to that question is no. And we've already created a lot of development, at least in the central Puget Sound region, that's not going anywhere realistically, which means whatever else happens has got to be done even more carefully. And where we can, we need to try to take out what's there and make it better where we can, when we can, where it makes sense, where the gains are real. And that's a lot of places, actually.
There's a few different more personal questions that have come in. Kelly asks, do you remember your first orca encounter? Can you share a brief memory? How did this experience touch or change or inspire you?
Yeah, I can share that. I was with Ken Balcom with the Center for Whale Research out on his little boat, which is a beat up old Boston whaler. It's called the Chimo, which is named for this poor white albino orca whale that was taken into captivity and died in the process. Ken Balcom is kind of the old man of the sea of the orcas, and we were out there together in his boat. He was doing his photo ID that he has done for many, many years, 40 of them at least, of the southern residents. And so there I was out doing my reporter thing, and I'd never experienced the orca whales before. And so all of a sudden, this incredible sound erupts quite near the boat. And I turn my head around, and I'm supposed to be taking notes, and I'm supposed to be, you know, getting quotes from him. And that is absolutely not happening. I'm so completely blown away, transfixed, and captivated by the miracle of this animal. All I can do is stand there and say, wow. So that's my first memory. And honestly, a lot of the memories include that sense of just awe and being in the grace of the space of this animal. It never gets old, that is for sure. And honestly, just the knowledge that they're out there buoys me up every single day, whether I see them or not, whether I'm anywhere near where they are. I just like knowing they're there. And then in the wintertime, when they actually swing into central Puget Sound looking for chum, I love it that people go roaring out of their office buildings or wherever the hell they are to head to the beach and look for them. I just think that's so beautiful, you know, whether they're in West Seattle or they're on Vashon or, you know, that's a beautiful thing that people are so thrilled. I love it when you're on a ferry boat and one of the captains says, oh, there's a whale, and everybody gets up and runs to the windows. I always expect the ferry to just tip. You know, the thrill factor is just so real. I mean, they're mammals like us. And I do think there's just a sense of thrill and connection that's very innocent and frankly, very ancient and very right and very good.
We have another personal question, which is, you know, why orcas over all the animals in all the world?
Well, fair enough. And, you know, I'll be the first to tell you, I can be swept away watching a bee do its toilette on a flower in my garden. Have you ever watched this up close? I spent a long time watching a bee resting on a zinnia in my pea patch garden the other day. And it's very cat-like, actually. They take their legs and they very carefully comb their pollen off their leg. It takes a long time. It's very beautiful. It's quite transfixing to watch a bee do its toilette. So I could be transfixed by a school of herring underwater. I can be thrilled at the sight of something as everyday as a chickadee. I mean, the natural world is, we're wired for this. This is part of who we are. We're not here alone, thank heavens. We're here with this vast intelligence of animal lives, whether it's insect or bird or salmon. But for the orcas, you know, honestly, for me, as a storyteller in the Northwest, as a reporter who has looked at so much for so long, I've been working for the Seattle Times now since 1997, and I was at the Spokesman Review before that. Orcas kind of tied it all together. You know, they are the animal that connect the whole geography of the state. They are connected to salmon, which brings together all the elements of a healthy ecosystem in our state, and the cultural aspects as well of all the different communities in our state. The history of how we've developed the land and water in our state. If you're looking for an animal that kind of tells the whole story, it'd be hard to find a better choice. And you put on top of that the wow factor, the charisma of these animals, it's hard to beat.
You know, we're just about over 7 o'clock, and we have a bunch more questions in that maybe Lynda can get back to people on a one-on-one basis. But we have one more question that I'd love to throw out there. It's from Jane. She says, "Hi, I'm a mother of 2 kids here in Seattle, and you know, what can I do to help make sure that these orcas are here for them and for all the generations beyond?"
I would say the first thing I would wish for you, which you're probably doing, is take your kids outside and make sure that they fall in love with and have a joyful sense of wonder, that they are enthralled by the miracle of what's around them in this region, and get them to a beach, get them to the forest, start a rock collection, press plants, learn the native plants, teach them the detail and wonder and beauty of what is around them. And I think kids have a natural affinity for science and for animals and for nature. They're the why tribe, right? I mean, why this, why that? They want to know everything. I would feed that abundantly, richly, joyfully, and no matter the weather, be out there. And I am just sure that that is the best way to create a lifelong sense of commitment and caring for the natural world, including these orcas and salmon. And there's so much great volunteer work to get involved with, these salmon enhancement groups all over our region. They would love to have you and your kids out there planting a tree on a Saturday, or cutting blackberry bushes, or, you know, this is work of many hands, and many hands make light work, but also joyful work. So, and we're also very blessed to have these excellent museums and NGOs in our region that are brimming with information to share about nature and science and culture. And so we're fortunate where we live. We have the absolute gift of these natural places to go enjoy. So I'd say that's number one. And then take advantage of these spectacular resources we have to learn more.
I saw a button recently that said "Vote Orca."
I like that.
What does that mean?
Vote Orca means pour your heart into it. You know, pay attention to public affairs, be involved in local politics, from your city council to your county council to your local flood district. Make sure that they know that you care about salmon and you care about orcas, and you vote, and you expect them to do the right thing on the minutiae of these local decisions, which is where orcas and salmon live and die. I mean, federal policy is great, but at the end of the day, it is your local government, your city council, your town council, your commission, your flood districts that are making these decisions, that decide whether wetlands stay or go, that decide whether a beach is hardened or stays natural, that decide whether a forest gets cut or doesn't, that decide and decide and decide. And they're deciding on behalf of all of who? Us. So vote Orca. Good idea. I like it. I want one of those buttons.
Well, I think that's all the time that we have for today. I want to thank both you, Lynda, and Helen so much for being here with us tonight. And I want to encourage everyone to check out and learn more about Lynda's forthcoming book, Orca, Shared Waters, Shared Home, and how you can help bring it to life at www.braidedriver.org/orca. And I hope that everyone has a beautiful rest of your evening and stays out of the smoke and as well. So with that, I think we're going to be signing off here. Any last words, Lynda?
Yes, I'm seeing a lot of questions we didn't get to. And if you send me those with the emails, I will answer those, each and every one. So get them to me and you'll get your answer. Thanks for being with us tonight. It means a lot to me, truly.
Excellent. We will make sure that those questions get to Lynda and then get back to you. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining and for your passion for the orcas of the Salish Sea. It will take all of us. Have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you.